This is George Newbern, the voice of Superman, and you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 364 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal. With me, my good friend and brother, our other host, Liam. Liam, it is an exciting month here. We are smack dab in the middle of what people are saying is arguably the greatest theme month of all time. People are saying this, many people, many such cases of people saying this. And we are continuing with a last look at the last part of the Last Son of Krypton this week, and boy, I'm kind of excited to wrap things up with how we left things last week, and we're fresh off the excitement of a new Superman movie, at least at the original time of recording here, that's now in theaters. Go see it. I'm not getting any kickbacks from James Gunn or DC Studios or David Zaslav or any of those guys. Like, that I'm just doing it of my own free will here. It's a great time to be alive and a Superman fan.
Absolutely. That's what spawned this whole month. And sometimes you do a theme month directed around a movie that's coming out into theaters, and you're like, maybe it doesn't always work out, or a themed review in some cases. But thankfully, at least one part, the super part of Super Fantastic Month has seemingly paid off, at least for a large percentage of its audiences. So yes, definitely excited to wrap up our own look at the DCAU origin story of Superman, the secrets of his past, and how he came to be here in Last Son of Krypton Part 3.
Absolutely, and we will get to our synopsis of this, but of course, before we get into our recap, we will get the official IMDb synopsis for this week's episode, which, as we've discussed each and every week, originally aired as a single one-time presentation on September the 6th, 1996. And then, of course, subsequent replays had the different parts here. So we are smack dab in the middle of part 3 here. Before we get into our IMDb synopsis, we will let you know that it's brought to you by buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review. That's right. It's what keeps us going, everybody. We run solely on caffeine and kind words and support from you, our listeners. And the best way to pass along the caffeine and kind words is buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review. If you head over there today, you can check out the different levels to become a supporter of the podcast. You can become a one-time supporter, like our friend Lorenzo did this past week. He was super pumped that we got to mention a little bit of, as he called it, Klana.
That was the Smallville ship name, so I'll allow it.
All right, yeah, you're the expert. I'll defer to you. So Klana, he was thrilled that we talked a little Klana last week with Clark and Lana, and promises that more discussions like that, maybe more reviews of the Batman, will also get support from him. So shout out to Lorenzo, thank you. Or perhaps you want to join one of our other supporters at the monthly tier level of support. You can do so by checking out our 3 different levels of support. All of them come with some really great fun perks, each with different opportunities and thank you gifts. And of course, our top level support comes with the opportunity to ask us a question about the episode we're reviewing and hear your question answered on air by yours truly. Looking forward to our question of the week that we will answer a little bit later today from one of those supporters. But if you want to check that out and join either Lorenzo or the other growing list of supporters, head over to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review and support the podcast today.
Absolutely. So this is the synopsis for The Last Son of Krypton Part 3, which was written by Alan Burnett and Paul Dini, directed by Dan Reba and Bruce Timm, music by Harvey Cohen, and animation by Coco and Dong Yang, and that synopsis reads as such. After saving Lois, Superman stops Lex Luthor's plans for an illegal arms deal, which is the beginning of their ongoing conflict.
poor sentence structure in some ways. That which is the beginning. I'm sure it's grammatically could be correct, but it just doesn't roll off the tongue in a smooth way when you're reading it in your deep announcer voice. So maybe a C plus there for that one. So I guess, Liam, our synopsis kicks off. We are dropped smack dab, quite literally, right where we left off from last week. If you recall, we had a very sudden cliffhanger because of the way that the episode is edited into 3 parts. And we had a plane get hit by a missile, and that was fade to black and left hanging here. So we pick things up as the plane, still, believe it or not, on fire and headed for doom. Superman is able to swing into action, or fly into action, I guess, in this case, in a very expedient manner, doing his best to save the plane. It is a bit of a struggle, so we learn a little bit about our Superman here. This is a showcase of what our Superman, kind of defining what our Superman is going to be, especially for the first several episodes, I feel here. So we learn that our Superman isn't the type of person that can flick his fingers and send the airplane flying, although he does do that with a gorilla later on in Justice League. This Superman is he struggles a little bit here. He's not quite built up the strength to simply handle this type of situation without any struggles. So we see that he struggles in a couple different ways. He tries to pull the tail to kind of slow the airplane's speed, but his strength unfortunately separates the tail from the rest of the airplane, which he browbeats himself for a little bit, and then gets the idea to fly towards the front and kind of give it a shove. That doesn't work as it continues to careen towards the ground, and then he ultimately settles on doing the old Fred Flintstone trick here, where you got to put your feet right on the ground and try and stop things using his foot brakes. But even that, we learn he struggles to do a little bit as the airplane careens through Metropolis, avoiding, thankfully, a lot of these skyscrapers there, but landing in a park. We see it skip across a body of water. It's a small one. I guess it's a little lake here. I was kind of expecting him just to kind of just jump on top of it and shove it to the bottom there, but then I remembered there's actually passengers on the plane that he's got to care about here. So it continues to skip across, and Superman once again flies up to the nose and is digging his heels in, so to speak, doing everything he can to avoid it encountering a group of kids and families that are watching. Who else would be performing in the middle of the park but a mime? And the mime, unbeknownst to him, is standing there. Everybody else is scattering while he's still performing, and the plane stops just short of him. Superman is able to save the day. Everybody gets off the plane, apparently no worse for wear. We see that someone there has a video camera. The news, I guess, arrived just in time and is able to get a very clear shot of this man in blue tights with a red cape. We then cut to a scene in the middle of the Daily Planet where they're reviewing that footage.
Freezer! What is that? Can anyone tell me?
Looks like a flying guy.
No kidding. I know he's flying, but who is he? Where did he come from? What does he want? Look who I'm asking.
Nice S.
Excuse me?
Right here. He's strong, he flies, he's the Nietzschean fantasy ideal all wrapped up in a red cape. The Superman.
Superman?
Hey, I like it. Superman. It's catchy, sticks with you, the kind of name that looks great splashed across 3 columns. Make it 4. Provided one of you can get an interview with him.
Somehow, I don't think a guy like that has a press agent, Chief.
Well, somebody better get something on this guy fast. I've never seen the city in such a state. Look at these faxes. If we don't get some answers soon, there could be a full-scale panic.
The official canon DCU naming of the Superman character that is coined officially by Lois Lane, who notices the nice S, quote-unquote, S, enunciate. Even Clark, with his super hearing, had to ask her to repeat herself on that one. I thought that was funny. But she clarifies, she mentions the symbol on his chest. It just is just that with the red cape and the red tights and the boots, he's the Superman. Perry seems to love that and says that if she can get an interview with him, they'll plaster that across the headlines there. And we learn very quickly that Clark, who's in the room, kind of gets a little bit nervous, wondering what his next step is going to be. He clearly sees that he's no longer the private guardian angel that he was, the urban legend for a little while. He's becoming a public figure at this point, and he needs to clarify what he stands for, so there's no ambiguity about it. What he's there for, what he stands for, and before deciding on how to go about getting that message out, he takes a trip back home to Smallville, where we see an older Martha and Jonathan Kent, who are there in the kitchen, and they're reminiscing with Clark.
We've kept this scrapbook since you left Smallville. Every time we read a story about an invisible angel helping someone, we knew our Clark had to be nearby.
But now that I've settled in Metropolis, it's going to be impossible to keep a low profile.
Yeah, I can see where landing a plane in the middle of the city might turn a few heads.
It's not just that. Suddenly people are calling me Superman. They want to know everything about me. Some are even afraid of me. Just like Jarrell and Lara warned. Does this mean I'm going to have to give up my life?
No, son. It doesn't matter where you were born or what you can do. You'll always be Clark Kent. Superman just helps out now and then.
Still, it wouldn't be bad if people knew a little more about Superman. I don't want anyone thinking you're like that nut in Gotham City.
There must be some way to get the word out.
So he gets some good advice from Pa Kent, who mentions that he'll always be Clark, that Superman is just around to help. And but Ma, she's got some words of wisdom here. She mentions that he's got to get out in front of this thing and make sure that people understand what he is, what he stands for, and that he's not, quote, like that nut from Gotham, unquote. So Martha Kent officially responsible for the first hint here that this is actually a linked universe, by the way.
I think at this point, the animated Batman is still airing in reruns on Fox. So this was like inter-channel, inter-promotional Easter eggs here.
Yeah, that's big time stuff right there. You gotta love that. Interesting trivia fact. So if you have DCAU trivia, Martha Kent is responsible officially for breaking the news that Batman exists in this universe and technically announcing the DC universe existed. So Superman decides, or Clark decides at this point, seems to get an idea just about how to go about getting his message out to the masses. So we cut back to Lois, who is in her car, and she's on the phone once again, kind of bemoaning, talking about how she could possibly be breaking such a huge story, obviously being responsible for naming the moniker of Superman and all of this buzz around the Superman, but no chance at understanding how to contact him. And wouldn't you know it, just when she's least expecting it, she hears a voice that she's not sure where. And I dubbed this moment the "you'll believe a car can fly" moment, as all of a sudden we hear Superman's voice, but can't see him. And then as he offers to speak to Lois privately, she agrees. But then all of a sudden, not being able to see Superman, her car begins to take off, and we see the car that Lois is in begin to take flight with Superman underneath. And that sets up our little opportunity here for our first official interaction, verbal interaction, between Lois and Superman.
That's right. So we cut to, I guess, a few minutes later after he's begun to explain his origins. This is their version of that scene where Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder go floating over the Statue of Liberty, I guess, but we don't see that happening. I'd like to think he did that to her before he sat her down on this like highway outside of. He just took her around the world real quick and then did that just to prove that he could. But anyway, yes, we get him explaining a little bit of his backstory, his coming from a planet called Krypton.
As far as I've been able to piece together, I'm the last survivor of a planet called Krypton.
Krypton.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
You don't believe me.
It's a little much.
Fair enough. All I ask is that you tell the truth about me.
And that is?
I'm not here to scare anyone. In fact, I've always tried to help people whenever possible.
You sound too good to be true. What's your secret?
What do you mean?
Well, you don't go around in blue tights and a cape all the time, do you? What do you do in your off hours?
I think that's a question for another time.
But as they're continuing to discuss things, she asks, well, what is it that he does when he's not out there saving people? He can't possibly be floating around in blue tights 24/7, though Superman kind of puts a pin in that one, says that's a question for another time, and flies off. So Lois is certainly charmed, and as we cut to I guess the next day, we see Lex Luthor on the massage table reading Lois's article with all of those facts, and is clearly not impressed by this alien in his own backyard, as he says. And Clark and Lois have actually come by to chat with him about the missing robot, and Lex is quick to point out that Superman didn't stop his robot from being stolen, and how this is going to cost him so much money now that he can't deliver this product to the U.S. military, as was his intention. However, Clark quickly points out that, wouldn't you know it, this might actually end up being a bit of a windfall for Mr. Luthor, as no doubt the U.S. and its allies will look for an even bigger and better version of this Lexbot now that the original one has fallen into quote-unquote enemy hands.
I'm the one who's out $1 billion battlesuit.
Actually, this could end up a silver lining in your pocket, couldn't it?
What's that?
Now that the terrorists have your prototype, the Pentagon is undoubtedly going to want you to build a bigger and better version for them. When all is said and done, this could net you a multi-billion-dollar windfall.
Lois, it almost sounds as if your friend here is suggesting I should be glad my suit was stolen. You're very amusing, Mr. Kent, is it? Yes, I'll remember that.
Nice work, Smallville. You're only the second person I've ever seen get under Lex's skin.
Who's the first?
Me, when I dumped him.
Whoa.
Ancient history.
We get a little bit of a pre-show Lois lore drop here, as she mentions that Clark got under Lex's skin in a way very few people have, and in fact, the only time she can really think of is herself when she dumped him. So apparently,
I had forgotten about that completely.
Yeah.
I was like, "Whoa, that kind of reshapes thing would have been." That's something else here from this pilot that feels like they were dropping breadcrumbs to play off of later, but we don't really. I don't think we ever really get much follow up to this, other than there's sort of this relationship that Lex and Lois have. A professional relationship that feels like they do know each other extremely well, but it's also could be easily explained that she's the top reporter and he's the he's the most famous guy in the city. So, but yeah, that's an interesting piece of lore that I don't think a Lexus coupling here that would have been something interesting to delve deeper in, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. I know a few versions have done this, like a pre-Superman arriving Lex Lois thing. I want to say the Lois and Clark TV series from I guess, which would have been airing just prior to this. I think did something similar. I don't know if that comes out of like maybe the post-crisis. There's our action item for the week. Hit us up at DCAU Review on the socials and let us know if Lois and Clark originated that as an idea, or if that comes from the comics or what. Because that did stand out immediately. That it's like, oh, that's really fascinating. Just because of who we know Lois to be, the fact that she would be with that guy is like, well, what could she have possibly seen in this creep? But again, we have to leave that up to our imagination as Lois and Clark continue chatting on their drive back to the planet. And Clark out and out says, as they continue to do some research, that he believes that Luthor has basically given away this Lexbot to this foreign government known as Kasnia, our first foray into a fictional Eastern European nation that we hear quite a bit more from throughout the course of the rest of the DCAU.
I was digging up some background info on Mr. Luthor and found this photo of him at last year's International Industrial Conference. Recognize the guy with the medals?
The region of Casnia. So?
So the U.S. and Casnia haven't been on real friendly terms lately. Seems the region's been employing an elite squad of terrorists to eliminate his political enemies.
Old news, Kent. The president broke diplomatic ties with Casnia months ago.
Which means Luthor couldn't sell the region to Warsuit without it being a deliberate act of treason.
So Luthor just left the back door open for him to take it.
It works in theory.
In theory, maybe, but Perry White doesn't run theories.
Where are you going?
I'd tell you, but you'd have to share the byline.
We head down to the Metropolis Harbor, where we're introduced to Bibbo for the first time, who is having words with this guy on this Casnian tanker ship that is docked at the Metropolis Harbor, and Bibbo's mumbling and complaining about them staying docked and not moving any cargo, and how they're taking jobs away from good union men. That's a really funny gag to throw in there.
I quoted that one too. Something again that like you would not pick up or understand as a child watching this, but then as an adult you're like, that's funny. That's a funny little line there, Bibbo.
Yeah, and again, you know everything you need to know about Bibbo in like the first 15 seconds here. as he's kind of mumbling to himself, Lois grabs him by the collar, quite literally, and pulls him into the alley, asks him what he knows about this tanker, and he tells her that they haven't moved any cargo on or off the ship, and even though it's been docked there for over a week. And so Lois decides to go up and investigate herself. She gives Bibbo a few coins, tells him to use a payphone to call Clark back at the Daily Planet if she's not back in 20 minutes, which Bibbo promptly does not, because he notices this is another thing where I'm like, I would love to know the origin of Soder Cola and specifically Bibbo's love of it.
Blasted scows leaving port tonight, and I says good riddance.
Gotta get on that ship. Listen, Bibbo, take this and call Clark Kent of the Planet. Let him know where I am. And tell him to call Police Commissioner Henderson if he doesn't hear from me in 20 minutes. Got that? 20 minutes. Thanks, Bibbo. I owe you one.
Sure. Let me see. Call Kirk Kent. Let him know about the boat and something about the police. Yeah. Okay. Hey, Soder. She'll be okay.
As he sees a vending machine next to the payphone and decides to use the coin from that instead, mumbling, she'll be all right to himself as he gets himself a treat. But we cut back to Lois, who is questioning the same ship worker who is trying to get her to go away, just like he was trying to get Bibbo to go away earlier. But the head liaison, the guy in charge of this ship, a fellow by the name of John Corbin, shows up and decides to try to take a bit of a more diplomatic approach to things, as he lets her onto the ship, and as he's showing her around, mentions that of course there's no cargo on this ship, as they currently are not seen as allies by the U.S. government. And they are only here on a diplomatic mission to try to reestablish ties. However, it's bad timing, as he's trying to charm Lois and seems quite infatuated with her, honestly. But right as he's trying to give her the spiel, Lois looks over his shoulder and sees these double doors that open up, and she sees the stolen Lexbot inside the cargo hold of the ship. So John Corbin does what any self-respecting terrorist murderer would do when he's caught red-handed. He pulls a gun, and then they promptly tie her up. And I think we cut back to the Daily Planet here, where Clark is trying to sort of figure out a connection on his own while he's being bored to death by Jimmy Olsen. Who's showing him all of his photos. Jimmy's
not showing him the good stuff here. He's got pictures, and I put good stuff in quotes here, but air quotes. He's showing him the pictures of polar bears and like people at the harbor.
Here's a shot of Luther getting a commendation from the mayor, a shot of the Special Crimes Unit, and, oh, I took this one at the dedication of the zoo's new polar bear exhibit. Cute little guy.
Yeah, nice, Jimmy. You didn't see Miss Lane come back, did you?
Nuh-uh. She brought me along last week to get shots for her smuggling story.
Is that right?
Yeah, have a look. Yeah, I figure a few more shots like that, and Perry's bound to put me on staff.
There, in the background. That ship's a Casnian tanker.
It's so small. How can you tell? Clark?
Jimmy points out that he was down at the docks the previous week, having taken pictures for the big drug smuggling or gun smuggling bust that Lois was reporting on down there. And Clark looks at the picture, and in the background, wouldn't you know it, he sees that Casnian flag on the side of the ship and realizes that that must be where they're holding the robot, and realizes, of course, that it must mean that that Lois could be in danger. Meanwhile, the ship has taken off into seas, and I guess right as they're into international waters, they're ready to off Lois and silence this leak once and for all. Thankfully, Superman arrives just in the nick of time, and we get a nifty action sequence we'll certainly talk about as he, deals with some rank and file machine guns, and Lois actually even helps him out as he gets a little bit overwhelmed. That's both a story thing and a visual thing, but this is definitely establishing early, which I think is kind of secondhand, obviously, if you've watched this series a couple times, but that this Superman, more in line with the Fleischer one, and actually something I think another thing that the new movie, the new live action movie, has in common with this is that he's not the guy that can shrug off every bit of violence that's perpetrated on him. He's not. Like a bunch of crates fall on him, and he's like a little bit overwhelmed for a second. Like he's not hurt, but it can overwhelm him. He can be knocked back, as we see here. So Lois actually intervenes to help him out at that point. But by then, Corbin has run and gotten into the Lex spot and begins to attempt to attack, including having Lois dead to rights in his crosshairs. But Superman is able to recover and fly her to safety back on the shore just a few moments later. And here's where we get our showdown here for the our main event. It's fight night as Corbin flies the Lex bot back onto the shore, looking around to see if he can find the two witnesses. And Superman, after making sure Lois is safe and telling her to go call the police, heads back for the big showdown.
That's right. It's Superman versus Lexoskel 5000. Place your bets now. Step right up. That's right. Yeah, we get quite a brutal battle here, as you were just saying, Liam. We really drive home the fact that Superman is a little bit more vulnerable than perhaps you would expect him to be. A little more human, a little bit more able to get hurt, or at least he's not able to simply shrug off the missiles and the gigantic whatever explosives that are being shot at him, the rocket propelled grenades or whatever coming out of this machine. There's some electricity that's used that shocks him. So Superman's a little overwhelmed initially. And then as they take to the streets of Metropolis, it's now nighttime, so there seems to be a little bit less traffic on the streets, but there's still people around. So Superman does manage to knock the Lex spot. There's a great scene that we'll talk about maybe in visuals also during the fight, where he punches it and it goes through an airplane hangar, and then it lands on it goes through one side of the garage door and then slides out the other, and Superman has to quickly fly around to the other side to try and stop it so that it doesn't slide across multiple buildings. He hit that thing hard. So they wind up just outside a building that's under construction. Superman gets knocked into the building. There's a cement mixer that he picks up and is able to use sort of as he lures John into shooting at it, and once it begins to catch fire, he throws it at Corbin just as it explodes. Corbin once again gets the upper hand, and it appears that he's about to best Superman. He hurls him into this building that's under construction and launches one of these grenades into it. It explodes, and the whole building comes falling down on Superman. And but Superman is able to quickly get the better of it, and eventually begins. He takes it up to a roof away from the citizens to keep everybody safe. And their combat continues at that point. But Superman kind of says enough is enough at this point and begins disassembling the robot piece by piece, first tearing off the arms and then ultimately knocking it backwards to a ledge, and eventually just giving it the old super breath, where he blows it off the side of the building, causing it to lose its balance and crash to the ground. He then quickly leaps on top of it and rips the exterior off, revealing Corbin inside, who at this point is being electrocuted by the short circuiting. He offers to go a few rounds without the suit, but it appears that Corbin is surrendered at this point, and Superman has beaten the Lexoskel 5000 and is remanding this vagabond into custody. So now we cut back to Lex Luthor, who's in his office, speaking to the Regent of Kasnia's representative, lawyer or something, who says that because they did not actually ever get the Lexoskel back to Kasnia, that they're demanding that Lex actually take the loss and refund them their money. He asks them if they're crazy, that he should take a $1 billion loss simply because this alien inserted his nose where it doesn't belong. His job was simply to provide the ability for the terrorists to steal the suit, not ensure its security once they had it. And it's at that point that the representative for the Regent mentions that Lex probably has more important things to do, as he sees over his shoulder is a very unhappy Superman floating outside the window with his arms crossed. And so Lex turns and begins having a conversation with him. I guess it's not really a conversation if you're the only one talking, though, right? It's a
monologue.
Monologue. It's a TED Talk.
I'm afraid we already have a window washer. Oh, the silent treatment, eh? Well, I don't know what you thought you heard out there, but I know what you can prove, and it's nothing. You see, Superman, I own Metropolis. My technology built it, my will keeps it going, and nearly 2/3 of its people work for me whether they know it or not. Even you have to admit it's a model of efficiency. And yet, I've often thought, why limit myself to just one city? A being with your abilities could be very useful to me on a, shall we say, global scale. Why don't you float on in and we'll discuss it? Say something!
I'll be watching you, Luthor.
Wait! I'm not finished with you!
Hey, look!
Meanwhile, Superman flies throughout the city, and we then see a big hero's welcome from the citizens of Metropolis, recognizing him, cheering him on, letting him know that they've accepted him as their hero for their city. And then we cut to what can only be described nowadays as what would be a post-credits sequence, although it is pre-credits here. As we cut deep into outer space, we see some aliens on board a ship who are bringing on a suspicious satellite. Of course, it is quickly revealed that satellite has Brainiac's logo on it, and it begins to break apart as the aliens look on, and these strange tentacles shoot out of it, begin attacking the aliens. We hear them scream in agony, and then the next thing that you see is a shadowy figure sitting in the chair, and we see it plug in with its tentacles to the computer, and the announcement that Brainiac is now back online from Brainiac himself, who has infiltrated the ship's computer, and the ship flies away. That's the end of our episode.
Phew.
Boy, lots of stuff here from this one, Liam. It's weird. I mentioned it. We are dropped right back in the end of it. This really does not work, splitting this into 3 parts. I think we talked part 1 could be its own part, but 2 and 3, you really got to keep them together, because dropping you into the middle of that flight sequence feels so sudden and uncomfortable in a certain way. It's just like, all right, we're right into the action here. But obviously this is the need for splitting this up for the broadcast television was a necessity at this time. So I understand if you wanted to repeat it in subsequent airings. With that said, though, this episode, I loved it. Like, I know we had some of our concerns last week. We talked a little bit about the plot being, a little bit, felt like a little bit of an afterthought at times. Felt like we kind of missed a whole chunk of Clark's life, and we didn't quite really understand, what happened to him between the ages of like 15 or 16 till he's in Metropolis. We cut over a whole bunch of Klana stuff. We cut over a whole bunch of things that, we kind of discussed that may have been interesting to learn about and made it feel like a sudden jump. I think if you're watching this all in one presentation, maybe that doesn't stand out as much. But in this case, because I do feel like this episode does a great job of establishing this adult Clark Kent / Superman in record time, because you have so much that has to happen in this final part. You have, Superman's big reveal here to Metropolis. He gets this interview with Lois. Then you got to quickly figure out, how you're going to get Lex back involved with this. Clark gets to do a little bit of reporting and discovery here, and then that's balanced off of Lois, who finds herself in trouble as she does her own investigation. And then we get, Clark really coming to the conclusion of what's going on, and then we get the big battle between the robot and Superman, and then we get the clash between Lex and the verbal clash between Lex and Superman at the end, and then we get this little oh yeah, don't forget Brainiac is still here too. I think it moves at a clip. It is certainly a very fast-paced episode, but I think that it works. It works for. I don't know that the plot itself works as a standalone, because again, you're dropped in the middle of a plane crash that's happening. But I guess technically you could. You're just like, all right, Superman's stopping an airplane. How it got hit, you don't need to worry about that. He's just stopping an airplane. That's all that matters.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, this was more fun and definitely more of a easy to watch by itself than part 2. I think definitely. And as a capper to all 3 parts, it's one. I mean, it's very, very action packed. Like we said, you open with an action sequence. You have the bit on the ship that bleeds right into the big robot fight that we get, to end the episode. So it's pretty wall to wall action, and then in between you have, even the character beats are very meaty, because you get Superman and Lois's first meeting. You get Clark and Lois, and you get more of an introduction to Lex, and then you get obviously the big Superman Lex showdown that we talked about right at the end there, and then the Brainiac tease. So like it's like a lot more eventful. Part 1, it's like, okay, we see Clark learning his origins, and then we see Clark in Metropolis, and we see him suit up as Superman for the first time, but like, again, it just fades to black mid-scene. So yeah, I think overall this is definitely a very satisfying cap to a 3-part adventure, and sticks the landing, even though while it was in the air, it was looking a little wobbly, but they stuck the landing here, I think, with part 3 for sure.
I agree. Yeah, I think it's a lot of fun. I think you get enough to learn about this Superman in the pilot. As we said, you're establishing a base for what to expect when he does have battles with giant dinosaurs and giant rubber ducks and other aliens and giant, volcano men and giant, other aliens and all that. Like, you're establishing at least a baseline for what to expect. I know there were still some complaints about, maybe Superman being a little too weak in this show, but I think for a children's cartoon, and in order for it to make sense, that does have to happen in order for it to be interesting. Because if he can simply, with a flick of his wrist, stop every single imminent danger without any struggle at all, it's going to be a pretty boring episode. Everything's going to be wrapped up in about 4 or 5 minutes or so. So making the Superman, and I think that's mentioned in one of the interviews with some of the directors and writers that worked on this show, that was a decision that they had to make. And it does ring true to those original Fleischer cartoons, which obviously are a huge influence for Bruce Timm and the other writers that worked on this show. So it does feel faithful, and it does play out here. I didn't feel at any point like this giant tin can that he's fighting necessarily had the best of him on its own, but you could see the circumstances that happened in and around him. Like, just because he's shooting a Gatling gun at him, Superman is able to figure out how to block it, right? But then he's hurled into a giant building and then a rocket propelled grenade shot into the building, and then the building collapses on top of him. Like, okay, it's a sequence of things that are increasingly more violent and more, spectacular that happened to him. It's like, okay, well, now I have some doubt here, because it's not just him versus an explosive, it's him versus an explosive and a building falling on top of him, and all this other chaos that's happening in and around him. So I thought that those sequences were great. I think overall, I like you had a lot to do with this whole project. Now, kind of looking at all 3 parts together, you had a lot to do with this. And while I still think that maybe there could have been a little bit more time spent on the middle part of what happened to Clark in the middle years, and maybe exploring some of his struggles that we talked about last year, I think together as a unit, this ends up being a very faithful, good Superman story that holds up as a great origin tale for a Superman story. And I think looking back at my scores at a 5 out of 10, I think I would probably be closer to maybe an 8, or maybe even a 9, I think, out of 10. I think it is a very strong representation, a great kickoff point. You got a lot of good action here that winds up towards the end, and then bookended with a really interesting sequence about his parents and the origins, and the destruction of Krypton. I think it's really compelling. So I think I'd be way off from where my original scores were for plot.
I think we undervalued this. I think that's maybe something that's often said about this series as a certain critique, similarly to what we've talked about with the new Batman adventures and the little bit we've covered them so far, of there aren't as many episodes that really delve into the psychology of the character and what motivates him and what he's thinking and feeling. So a lot of the later episodes in the series, it feels like it's just villain shows up and then we have Superman kind of reacting to whatever the scenario is, and that's fine and fun too, and it's not the case for every episode, but I do think this also stands out to me now because it has so much more emotional depth to it for all of our characters, from Jor-El and Lara in part 1 to Clark's insecurities both as a teenager and then as an adult. We just again, just having seen the live action movie, there's a great scene between Clark and Pa Kent in that movie. There's a kind of a scene that covers similar beats here that we talked about, where he's having this moment where he's kind of having this thing of like, well, if I'm going to help people and I'm going to be in Metropolis full time, can I do both? Can I still be Clark? And that moment of Pa just easing his mind and letting him know that you will always be Clark no matter what is so great. And I think it gets into some of Superman's how the dual identity works. We've talked about, we've kind of dissected that to death almost with Batman over the years and different different versions of the character. So I think it's fun here to see when it's the Superman character kind of struggling with a dual identity, and which parts of him is he going to have to share with the world, and what can remain private. So I think that's like a really interesting layer to it as well. So yeah, I would definitely be a lot higher, I think, if we were rescoring this. But again, because of our own arbitrary rules, we are not. But yeah, suffice to say, I disagree with my past self as well.
Yeah, hard to disagree with disagreeing with ourselves. We're the ones who are the deciders, so to speak, to coin a phrase. So yeah, it's yeah, evident in our discussion here. I think spending a little bit more time, maybe not. We've learned our lesson, from spending 30 minutes on a review for something that is 66 minutes. Maybe not the most, maybe the most efficient way, but maybe the not the most fair way to dissect an episode there. So we've learned, we've gotten better, we've made better decisions. We're learning new things every day. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is animation and visuals. And once again, Coco Dong Yang, I think that's who we said.
Mm-hmm.
This, yeah. Okay, cool. My notes from week 1 still relevant. Good. Coco and Dog Gang responsible for this part as well. Boy, this has a lot, because we talked about it. There's a lot of visual, interesting things. I think the first entire probably 6-7 minutes we have, it feels like, is the plane crash. Lots of very interesting things there, and then we get a little bit of a lull before we get the action sequence that happens with Superman saving Lois on the boat. But there's still plenty of things I feel like in between there. Obviously the plane at the beginning, the robot at the end, those are the big action beats. But happy to discuss those or anything else that stood out to you as far as interesting sequences or things that you really love to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched on it a little bit when we were recapping the plot here, but yeah, this is a Superman who can't, stop everything by putting his pinky finger up. Like him, I liked watching him kind of struggle and almost fail to stop the plane crash at the start of the episode. I think that's a really fun sequence where he grabs it by the back tail fin, and it just kind of crumples in his hand and tears off, and he has to keep kind of keep at it, and just barely manages to pull it off because he's still learning. He hasn't, he may have been saving people falling out of windows or pulling cats out of trees, but he certainly hasn't caught a plane yet to this point, even if that's old hat to other versions of Superman. So I really like that sequence, and then seeing him go toe to toe with the Lex spot certainly is a fun sequence. I love all the weird little weapons that the Lex spot thing has. It has like the big machine gun and missile launchers, and it's all clankety. It's like you got all these things coming in and out of its wrists and like different, and it has like a napalm thing that it shoots out at one point. So like I love the functionality of that, and then they keep cutting back to again years before the Iron Man movies made this like a standard thing. We keep cutting to Corbin inside the robot, like cackling and being evil to make it, I think, to give our villain a face, since he's otherwise in this robot that doesn't really have any expression. So I think that was a good idea as well, to kind of keep cutting back to Corbin to remind you of our smarmy evil guy inside the suit, and that it's not just some generic robot that Superman is punching up here. So I liked that bit as well. I think it's very strong visually. Honestly, one of my favorite visual things probably in the whole show, though, is it's not really an action sequence. It's just Superman floating out of Lex's window with the moon in the background, with a stern look on his face, floating up and down as Lex monologues at him. I think that's some of the best Superman Lex stuff ever right there in that scene.
Yeah, everything about that is cool. Like Superman, that's maybe the coolest. Is this the pinnacle of Superman's coolness in this show? I don't know. I mean, there's probably other cool moments, but as far as like being the coolest, he goes from that. Honestly, he kind of acts a little bit like Batman at the end of his fight with Corbin, where he threatens him and asks him if he wants to go a couple rounds without the suit. I thought that with the fire hydrant raining down on top of him, I thought that sequence is really good. But then that goes right into the sequence with him standing there with his arms crossed, and he's just floating up and down, just kind of listening. And you see, it's great. Lex's expressions go from, this annoyed, to seeing Superman out there. He switches his face to being unbothered to smug, and he's giving this whole dialogue, this whole monologue about, how he owns the city and everything belongs to him, and perhaps Superman would like to come in and have a chat. And then there's this switch when they cut to Superman and he's just has not moved other than floating up and down, and they cut back to Lex's face and he's just completely untethered. Like, his rage knows no bounds at that point, and when he grabs the Lexo Skell and throws it at Superman, it's great. That sequence is awesome. Like, that's an all-time great Superman at Lex monologue there. I feel like there's it's more of a back and forth in the movie. No spoilers for what is actually said. It's more of a back and forth, but there is a moment in the movie where they kind of get that same little back and forth there. Although they're standing in the same room, not floating outside, not quite as cool as this representation. But yeah, there's some good stuff with that. I like that. I mean, the giant moon floating behind Superman. This is the first time we see the Superman at night. It's
the way it's colored, like the way the light of the moon is kind of backlighting him, so you get much darker blues on his suit and darker reds and things on his suit coloring for a lot of the fight sequence too. But yeah, that bit in front of the moon especially.
And Lex's ostentatious office with the shark tank in it. We really get to see the lavish nature in which this guy, just so full of himself, how he feels about himself, and it's really backed up by everything. I feel like that in that setting there. So he's got a retractable window on his penthouse office. Like, what a prick! Yes. That's really hammered home here with this. So yeah, that sequence is great. I think a lot of the stuff you mentioned, obviously the fight with the Lexo Skell is great. I think the scene even before that where he has to save Lois from the ship is great too, because we get to see some really interesting, some really fun things where he obviously flies in to save Lois at the very last second. She's about to be executed. You get this split second burst of speed through the roof. He lands in front of her, back to the guys, like they're shooting his back, which is a classic Superman thing. He's shielding Lois, and then he turns around and catches the bullets, which is a great thing, and then hurls the bullets at their feet. Like, I loved that. Like, that also feels like something right out of a Golden Age Superman comic book. Maybe he'd probably eat the bullets in the comic book, but here hurling them at their feet is probably a close second best there. But I thought that sequence is really good. There's some really interesting lighting that they do for the Lexo Skell in that sequence too. It's the similar lighting. Like, it gives me the same vibes of how they gave those red highlights to Venom in the Spider-Man show. It's kind of so iconic. They gave this extra set of lighting to this Lexo Skell where it doesn't just have the normal cell shading on it. There's like a third level of cell shading on it that kind of reflects off of, I guess, whatever another light that's in the room or something like that. But it was very detailed. I thought that the cell shading on that was really, really stood out for the sequence. It was really interesting. I think, for like I said, the rest of the episode, him stopping the airplane at the beginning, again, more classic, great Superman tropes that, you can't help but love Superman stopping an airplane. I mean, it happens in almost every iteration of the character, comic book, film, cartoon, whatever it is. It's Superman and planes go together like peanut butter and jelly. He's gotta stop him. I love the way that this bit goes. Obviously this is one of his earliest interactions with stopping such a large flying object. So him starting at the back and ripping the tail off, I thought was a great touch, and then having to go to the front and slamming on the brakes using his feet and coming up just behind that mime who faints when he realizes that, the plane just stopped short of him is great. A great bit. Also, a great little comedic bit there. Yeah, I think the last thing I think is that's interesting, obviously the sequence, you talked a lot about the sequence between Superman and the Lexoskel, but I think the thing that we can really talk about is what the heck is this Brainiac design here at the end in that I've always wondered this, like, did they just not know what Brainiac was going to look like? Obviously the shadow is good because you're playing off of the fact that what he's going to look like later on. But it feels like whatever this silhouetted alien looking thing with multiple arms that's ultimately sitting in this chair, yes, you have the electronic element with the different like appendages that stick into the computer, but it almost feels like an organic type alien creature here sitting in this throne that you only see silhouetted, and then you never see that version of that character really again.
Yeah, it is interesting. It would have been fun to see maybe like an evolution of the Brainiac design over the course of the series. That's definitely something they played with in the comics. I know over the years of using different designs and kind of creating the idea that these are all different versions or different robotic bodies that he's kind of shed and moved on from over the years. So yeah, it would have been cool to see more of this weird tentacle bot as well.
Yeah, I'm perfectly okay with the robot design that we got. I want to know, are there, maybe this is something we can eventually ask friend of the show, Dan Reba, like, are there images somewhere out there, drawings of like an alien robot hybrid tentacled Brainiac that exist, a character design, something that wasn't what we ended up with in the form of the robot Brainiac with the cone head? I'd be very interested in learning that. But going back to what our original scores were for animation and visuals here, I think our original scores were 8 and 7, respectively. I think I would probably be around there. I think some of that stuff and that fight sequence with Superman and the robot at the end are really great. Like him climbing out of the fire, and then all of a sudden he's kind of like looking for the robot, and then the robot rises from the ashes above him. Some really neat tricks that they did there. The fire, the explosions, the stuff to make you think Superman's beaten. All that's really great. I think I would probably go 8 or 9. I think I'm not gonna haggle over a point. So I guess I would probably stick with my score of 8. What about you?
Yeah, honestly, I think just based on the strength of this part and part 1 and how much, again, just the way they had to design all of the, a completely new version of Krypton and the architecture and all of that. I think, yeah, this would have to be, 9 or a 10. Like I don't think we insulted it with the 7s or 8s. But like it's, I think I would be probably a little bit higher than even my original self, just based on really part 1 and part 3 holding it up. Not that part 2 was particularly bad, but as we talked about, there was maybe some timing issues that were kind of fixed in the edit, and then it's just not very it's not the most visually interesting content. So I think parts 1 and 3 though are just so strong visually that you kind of just got to tip your cap to everybody involved.
There you go. All right, Liam, let's move on to category 3, which is going to be music. And part 3, once again, a different music composer credited with music for this, that being the late Harvey Cohen with part 3. Harvey, of course, Mr. Cohen worked on several different of the DC animated universe properties, Batman animated series, New Batman Adventures, also did some stuff for Mask of the Phantasm as well. As far as music is concerned, I dare say this this is going to sound like a negative, but it is not. It feels like somebody just put the Shirley Walker Superman theme on repeat and just let it play from the get-go. Like from the first scene, it does drop out a little bit, but we hit the Superman theme hard in this part 3, and I love it.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a vague memory of us like almost complaining about that when we when we did it originally, and maybe again if you watch parts 2 and 3 back to back, you got it more. But yeah, I think it's great. I think the music in this episode is great. Yeah, it's basically you get 3, like you said, between the plane, him saving Lois on the ship, and then the big fight at the end. Like you kind of do get 3 big Superman action sequences, so it totally makes sense to really rely on that theme. And I think it goes well. We also get like the first time I think we hear the Lex theme brought in when he's giving Superman the big speech through the window as well. So a lot of those character themes coming in here in this. But yeah, definitely the Shirley Walker Superman theme is definitely the most frequently heard piece of music in this third part. But yeah, I think if anything, that's a strength, not a weakness.
No, I agree. Yeah. I mean, like I said, it does feel like somebody hit the spam button a little bit here. And we hit it. But as you mentioned, the when in Rome, the sequence is called for it here. He saves the airplane. He gets Lois, he picks up Lois's car. That's pretty heroic. And then we get the big fight sequence at the end where he overcomes the robot. So and then you get it again when he, as you mentioned, when he flies away from Lex and he's flying through the city. We really get the heroic theme played as people are cheering him on. So I think you mentioned it also. You get the Brainiac theme a little bit at the end also, and that weird robotic warbly sound that always comes in when he appears, which is great. And I also had mentioned had noted the Lex theme as well here. So one of if not the first time we get the Lex theme here played in the series. So something that of course would be a pivotal and memorable theme to play throughout, leading up all the way through Justice League Unlimited. So, yeah, good stuff here from Mr. Cohen, albeit not much of not much differentiation here between the different things, not a lot of variety between the scenes here, but you're in an action-heavy environment. You're really driving home the fact that the Superman theme, which I can't remember where I saw it or read it. I think it was in one of those behind-the-scenes things, but they mentioned that and I don't know how we didn't talk about it a couple weeks ago when we were talking about the Shirley Walker theme, but the fact that she wrote it to literally say Superman, like that's how she wrote and composed the theme to actually say Superman over and over again, which is great. So always a good day when you hear that theme and really established it here for this episode. Again, our scores were, I think, 6 and 7, which feel very low to me. For this, I think I would probably be a couple points higher, maybe closer to an 8 if I were rescoring this all together here.
Yeah, I think I would probably be in that same ballpark. I think again that the music as Krypton is exploding in part 1 is so good, and then yeah, again it is a lot of the Shirley theme in this part 3, but I think it's great, and there's some great incidental action beats as well in between when we're cutting to like the peril of the citizens as he's trying to stop the plane and things like that. So yeah, I think a really strong outing. I think I'd again maybe 1 or 2 points up, but yeah, definitely on the higher end for my music score.
All right, Liam, and that will take us to our final category of the day, which is going to be voice actors and actresses, and it's a lot of the real like core cast here for this final episode here. As we talked a little bit about their performances in last week's episode, but you really get I feel like a real spotlight on the big guns here for this one as we talk about our voice actors and actresses here for our final category of the day.
A lot of the same names we talked about last time, but we do have once again Charles Howerton as Hans, one of the other terrorists. We have Nick Savalas as the attorney, who's I think the one that's in Lex's office near the end. We do get our first appearance of Brad Garrett as Bibbo here. He's again a lot of fun. Has a very funny. Just introducing like this quirky guy who pops up from time to time in the series but he has a great scene there, and obviously is our Lobo eventually too. So that's a lot of fun. David Kaufman briefly as Jimmy. Not much for him to do in this week. Thankfully, perhaps nothing against Mr. Kaufman. He's a fine actor. It's just we have Lauren Thomas Angela just very briefly. She's like in the crowd trying to get Superman's attention at the end of the episode. And then I'll move on to some of our bigger parts of the episode. We'll mention them first because this is someone laid out a fun fact for us on the site formerly known as Twitter this week. We talked about Mike Farrell as Jonathan Kent and Shelley Fabares as Martha last week, but what we didn't note or didn't know perhaps is that those two were a real life couple. And so our one of our listeners, Joseph, let us know about that, and that they are in fact a real life couple, and that probably adds to the chemistry they have when they're interacting with each other. But they also, as we've talked about, get this very nice scene in the Kent family kitchen as Superman's kind of or Clark's kind of at this crossroads of what he's going to do, and is he going to kind of reveal himself to the public fully. And Mr. Farrell and Mr. Bars, they get a really nice scene together in different ways. Ma I feel like is played a little bit more comedically in her, like she gets the line about the nut in Gotham, but how they both are kind of still giving him that wisdom and that guidance, even though he's not living on the farm anymore. I like that. It's only one scene, but they do very well.
Yeah, no, it sets the tone. Also, obviously, we kind of see Clark return there a couple of times. Obviously, they're pivotal in raising Supergirl. They're in charge with doing that later on. So we see they are a fountain of wisdom, a seemingly calming presence for Clark, and somebody that he obviously loves dearly. People that are warm and that are friendly and are inviting even to Martians eventually. So yeah, they're a great couple. Both, they really bring that warmth and parental wisdom, I feel like, that you kind of come to expect from a Martha and Jonathan. So great. Not a ton, as you said, one small scene here, but definitely enjoyed that little encouragement that they both give. And there is a chemistry between Ma and Pa that really seems to come through in their performance. So it makes sense being a real life couple there.
That's right. We have George Zunza once again as Perry White. A little bit more for him in this third part here. Again, it's really only one scene, but he's doing, again, I would classify this as like classic Perry White stuff of yelling about how we need answers. How does this work? Who is this guy? What's he doing here? And that obviously leads into the scene where we give Superman his name, and that's fun as well. We do briefly. Well, it's literally like 5 words, but we do have Corey Burton as Brainiac back this week. In that sequence we've already talked about, and then we'll start getting into our kind of I guess the big 4 for this one. Our villains of the piece. We have Malcolm McDowell as John Corbin, and this is something I always forget. Obviously, I remember that he's in this before he becomes Metallo, but he's got this like real slimy undertone to himself as Corbin when he's like talking to Lois on the ship and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's got there's just like a real skeevy energy to this guy that Mr. McDowell, obviously a classically trained actor, stage actor, but not surprised that he's a great voice actor. But it's just like, oh, there's a weird extra level of like creepy. There's a real creepy vibe coming off this guy in that scene where he's on the ship with Lois.
Yeah, no, he is like, I know that he's from some nondescript European country, like obviously based on But I feel like he really brings home the skeevy nature of like that stereotype that you see in like prototypical Hollywood movies where you know the creepy European guy comes in and is trying to be super suave, and the first thing that he does. First of all, I love that Lois barges in past him. Like he doesn't quite invite her onto the ship. She just like invites herself after he's like trying to Rico Suave her. And
Yes.
then like his first move is to, let's go talk about this over dinner, shall we? Like he's gonna smooth things over, but he's also, he also might get something out of this that he's looking for from this attractive woman. And she pays him no mind. But yeah, I would agree the skeeziness of him really comes out in those interactions with Lois, and it is a funny archetype of a stereotype of a overconfident European guy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just like I was like, that's, we always talk about how great he is as Metallo, but I was just like, man, there's like regular old John Corbin is like weirdly sinister and slimy too I feel like in a unique way, pre-Metallo Corbin here, but enjoyed that. Of course, we have Clancy Brown once again as Lex Luthor. Like we said, this is really his, our first big entree onto his Lex. Again, it's hard to come up with new ways to talk about how great he is. There's a reason that, he becomes kind of the main villain of the whole. I mean, him and Darkseid are kind of like end up being the main villains of the whole universe by the time we get to Justice League. Like that, there's a reason that this guy, kept being asked back. But yeah, like we said, that as we've already said, that scene between him and Superman, which is mostly obviously Mr. Brown, because Superman barely says anything, is it's an incredible monologue. And like you talked about both a visual and and the music, it's one of the reasons we love breaking things down across these different characters is because or categories, is because it's everything comes together here, and it's all culminated in Mr. Brown's voice performance as he gives that speech about how he owns the city and 2/3 of its citizens work for him, whether they know it or not. And he's just, how smug he is at the start, to then, you see the facade slip and the power hungry madman rear its ugly head for the first time as he loses it towards the end there. It's like, man, that's, like we said, it's one of the best scenes in the whole series. It's probably one of the best scenes in the whole animated universe. So, and a big part of that obviously is Mr. Brown.
Yeah, it really sets the tone for obviously the relationship that you'll have between these two characters. And I think it really is the tone for what is asked of both of these characters. We know that Mr. Daly as Superman, a lot of times his dialogue is understated. The character is designed to be this cool, calm, and collected superhero that's kind of introverted and a little bit understated. And he, as a superhero, he doesn't appreciate the spotlight or the limelight and all of that. And he kind of, clearly in this episode, he's still kind of figuring out what that identity looks like and how to balance that being Clark. But in this scene, having that one line of, I'll be watching you, versus this entire monologue where, Mr. Brown has to come across as both being overconfident, cocky, slimy, just the evil nature just dripping off of him, but then quickly flipping a switch to this outrage that he has that Superman would dare to disrespect him, and then responding in kind when Superman says, I'll be watching you, to the fact that Superman again follows up that disrespect with flying away from him. So, the outrage that continues to flow out of that character is communicated extremely well. Obviously, one of these days we'll sit down and we'll have a bonus episode where we talk about our official Mount Rushmore of voice actors, I think. But this is why when we talk about who would in theory go up on that fictional mountain, we include Mr. Brown in that conversation. It's for moments like this. It's for moments that that are obviously continuous throughout the DCAU, but all started with this really memorable sparring match that really somehow with one line Superman wins. It's like a verbal boxing match where it looks like Superman's just about to take a dive, and then he comes up with this uppercut that knocks out Lex with one punch. So yeah, really, really great stuff from him, from Mr. Brown, obviously playing off of our lead, Mr. Daly.
Absolutely. And then, yes, we have, of course, once again, Dana Delaney as Lois Lane. Again, I feel like we said it all last week and 100 times before this, but yeah, she's expectedly great in this one. Again, her kind of figuring out the Kasnia connection and the Docs connection on her own, and then being there, she is kind of shuffled off. But I think again, speaking of how Clancy Brown plays off Tim Daly, the scene, just that quiet scene where they're out on this overlook, this little side road off the highway overlooking the city, and he's telling her, I don't want to scare anyone. I just want to be here to help and do the right thing. And she just says, she's like, you sound too, like, you can hear in her voice, like she genuinely wants to believe in him from like the first minute she meets him, but she's trying to kind of keep her like wall of cynicism and skepticism up, but it's like, but he's so inherently good that like she can kind of tell, like her gut is telling her like, okay, I think this guy's for real, even though she feels like and I feel like that comes through in some of her lines when she's speaking to Superman throughout the rest of the episode, of like, she's like the slow realization of like, oh my gosh, this guy's for real, like is kind of setting in on her in this episode, which I think is fun to listen to.
No, I agree. I mean, we talked about her last week really having some great moments to shine, and this week I think is another example here of her ability to really set the tone for what this character is going to be. She's snarky, she's got a little bit of comedy to the lines that she gives. She's still got some verbal, back and forth with Clark and Jimmy and Perry that happen, but her one-on-one with Superman, where you can kind of see, like you said, those walls sort of come down a little bit, where, whether it's the budding attraction that she has to him, the gratitude that she has for him saving her life, the fact that she's in awe of the fact that this alien is here on Earth and is sitting here talking to her and explaining to her and has shown all of these powers that he has off that are just so hard to believe. Whatever it is, in Miss Delaney's direction or in her performance, it certainly feels like that comes out in earnest in how she performs. And I think we talked about her interactions with Mr. McDowell's Corbin and how she is slightly flirtatious right at the beginning, but then immediately when she picks up on the flirtation from Corbin, just completely shuts it down and goes into reporter mode. Miss Delaney was seamless in the way that she was able to get that feeling across. And then I think there's some really, really good stuff. Even her interactions with Bibbo are great, obviously, with Brad Garrett. So some really, really good stuff for Miss Delaney here. More names to talk about when you talk about that Mount Rushmore, I feel like.
Absolutely. And then, of course, we just have our Superman, Tim Daly, to talk about. Like we said, because a lot of this episode is people reacting to him and it's very action heavy, we don't get as much. But again, for the scenes we've already talked about, the scene in the kitchen with the Kents and then his interactions with Lois and Lex, I think he does a really good job.
No, he's fantastic. And, one of the things, I don't know if we mentioned it when we were talking about plot, but one of the things that I really liked about this, that the plot sets up, is the idea that Clark is a investigative reporter at heart. Like, they really drive home the idea that he's struggling with this idea of how to balance not going crazy and having to be Superman, and that the Clark persona, who he really is, grounds him, whereas the Superman persona is something that he feels as a an obligation that he is required to do and to help, and what that he wants to do, but how important this Clark persona is to the character, which, you know, is inherently a really interesting Superman thing, I think, that we talk about pretty frequently on the pod. But I love that this being the first episode, you really establish the idea he's not just Superman that puts on a suit and goes to work and writes a newspaper article about whatever. Like, he is at heart, he has journalistic skill. He has this investigative portion of his body that obviously lends to him having an advantage when he's Superman. You know, he has that, he's able to apply that same skill then and there. But here, while he's Clark and he's in the planet and he's doing, you know, the investigative work, he figures out and is able to get under the skin of Lex, you know, to figure out that there would be some really good financial advantages for him to allow the suit to be stolen. And then, you know, the interaction with Jimmy later, where he kind of or with Lois later, where he puts two and two together and is kind of explaining to her why he thinks Lex was really okay with this whole thing, and putting the pieces of the puzzle together. I feel like that's where you get a lot of the stuff this week for Mr. Daly to shine, which is interesting, because a lot of the Superman is punching, you know, one or two verbal quips with Corbin and, you know, beating himself up about the airplane, and then the one line with Lex, and then the stuff in the middle is just kind of the punching and the kicking, so to speak. So the scene with Lois is great too as Superman, but I really appreciated his take as Clark here, and the way that he was kind of able to communicate that feeling of you know, of concern that he has as Clark to not lose himself in the Superman persona. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. I think, you know, looking back at our voice acting scores, I think we talked on episode 1 about, you know, disagreeing with our 8 and 7 scores, just because of who's who in this episode.
Yeah.
I'd probably, looking back, change that to a 10, just looking at who is in this episode, what they do, some of the really great interactions and scenes that we get, and some of the memorable lines and moments that we get. So yeah, I once again disagreeing with my past self on my assessment of our voice cast this week.
Absolutely, yeah. I think I would definitely be. Yeah, I think it's a 10. I think between part 1, yeah, looking at this as all 3 parts, scoring it for all 3 parts, yeah, I think this would have been an easy 10, looking back on it now. But c'est la vie, as they say.
That's right. All right, Liam, well, that will begin to wrap us up for this week. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you agree with us, we'd love to hear your thoughts, or maybe even if you disagree with us. You know, are there some things that we neglected to discuss that you really like or really hate about this? Are we flying high in the month of Super Fantaz month? And, you know, wearing some Superman colored glasses here that really are giving us some revisionist history here. Let us know. Send us a message on Instagram in the DMs. Tweet at us at DCAU Review on both Instagram and Twitter. If you're a new follower of ours or newly checking us out, we had a recent surge of followers on Instagram that we're very thankful for. So if you're checking out the podcast or have been checking it out for the first time, we appreciate you tuning in. Hope you'll stick around and check out some of the episodes in the archives also at DCAUreview.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We already mentioned ways to interact with us. Slide into those DMs on Instagram, Twitter. Tweet at us. If you don't use those, we do occasionally get on our Blue Sky and Threads and Facebook. So you can always use those as an opportunity as well to interact. Or, as we talked about at the top of the show, you can check out buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review. And then, of course, follow us on our YouTube channel as well. Search DCAU review, or if you're following us on one of those social media pages, just check the link in our bio. We have everything there kind of organized, neat, and friendly for you, including our link to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review, which we mentioned, Liam, at the top, was the place to go and support the podcast. And also, if you become a monthly supporter at our highest tier, you get the opportunity to ask us a question This week, we once again have a question from our good friend, Zach. Zach, thanks for being a loyal supporter of the podcast. Zach's question is about Brainiac. It says, he is discovered at the very end drifting in outer space. If he had never been discovered or unleashed, do you think he would have been just drifting in space forever? They didn't really do anything to open his vessel, so I'm guessing that he was just waiting for his spaceship to come along so he could plug in and take over. What do you think? Good question. It's good speculation here. Good opportunity to speculate about what could have been, Liam.
Yeah, so that is interesting because he's not a living being, so it's not like he was hibernating necessarily, you would think. But yes, he does wait to activate. He didn't seem to have any kind of propulsion system attached. Maybe he didn't have time to build one into the satellite before he went shooting off into space or whatever. But yeah, it is an interesting question if he's just been floating around for however long, what the plan was. But yeah, I guess he's lucky to have found some alien good Samaritans. They weren't lucky, but he was, I guess.
I feel like it would have been an interesting. Obviously, DCAU doesn't really do true Elseworlds, but the what ifs of the world. Like, what if Brainiac's satellite had crash landed on Earth first instead of Superman's rocket? Of course, we have Superman Red Son, where he goes to he lands in communist Russia. But what would have happened if Brainiac landed in the U.S. and instead of Clark's rocket? Could be an interesting story. Or what if his rocket had landed, or his satellite had landed on Apocalypse first? And we have our first, would he have sort of wormed his way in and worked alongside Darkseid only to overthrow and take him, like we see him doing so later on in Justice League? Or is this a case where we think Darkseid would have been able to best him and sort of master using him as the technology, and how that would have affected the trajectory once Apocalypse finally did invade Earth? Lots of fun things to kick around there as to what could have happened. But always love those types of questions. Thanks, Zach. If you want to join Zach in asking us a weekly question, feel free to head over to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review. Liam, as we mentioned, we are officially now deep in the heart of Super Fantas Month, and we are winding things down next week with our final review of the month, and it just happens to be the same weekend that the Fantaz portion of Super Fantas Month is being celebrated, as the Fantastic Four return to the movie theaters. And while we appreciate that old 90s Fantastic Four cartoons, we typically don't travel to the Marvel Elseworld side of the galaxy unless it's an April Fool's. But thankfully, there is a sort of DCAU version of the Fantastic Four for us to revisit next week.
That's right, Cal. So we're heading back to the future.
The future, Liam?
That's right. All the way to the year that's 50 years from now, whenever now is, as we head back to Batman Beyond and look at another re-review of a season 1 episode. We did cover this. It was in a double feature with the episode Shriek, which is like a huge episode to talk about. So I'm guessing we talked about this for about 5 minutes, because this was also very, very early on in our reviews. So it was, not only did it didn't even get its own half hour, it got a split half hour with another episode. So we are in fact talking about the episode Heroes, which features a certain pastiche of Marvel's first family, the Fantastic Four, although they are known as the Terrific Trio, and we'll certainly enjoy talking about that. From my memory, there's a lot of not just Fantastic Four, a lot of just Marvel in general visual gags and Easter eggs in that one. So looking forward to going back, as you said, as we get to the Fantaz portion of the month here, just in time to wrap it up.
Cannot wait, Liam. It's going to be fantastic.
Hey.
What did I do that? But until then, I'm Cal.
I'm Liam.
We will talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.